What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry, another free agency edition of the Next Pats podcast for you because series of moves have been made and the Patriots not exactly diving in the pool head first and making a big splash. We know by now, and if you listen to the last Next Pats podcast, that the Patriots missed out on their opportunity to sign Calvin Ridley. They also have missed out, since we recorded that podcast, on tackle Jonah Williams. Not a star by any means, certainly not an all-pro, but a capable starting caliber NFL tackle who's played both the left and right sides, somebody that I thought would be a great fit here in New England, ends up going to Arizona for a very reasonable 2-year, $30 million contract. Old Patriots exec Monty Ossenfort landing himself a starter at one of the most important positions in football, while the Patriots, they're still kind of waiting. Talk about premium positions the Patriots need to fill. Quarterback is obvious, but we know they have the number 3 overall pick, and it appears as though there's a high likelihood that they'll be taking a quarterback with that selection. Let's just put it that way. Tackle. Sure, Mike Owenu brought him back, re-signed him, gave him good money. Kudos. And he might be your right tackle. Still a glaring need at left tackle. Now, let's not, as Michael Felger says, punish them for something they haven't done yet. They haven't yet missed out on Tyron Smith. DJ Humphries, former Cardinals left tackle, is available. There are some names out there that could potentially fill the role in the here and now. You don't necessarily have to leap at somebody to play off of your next quarterback's blind side early in the draft. They could sign someone 5 minutes from now, but it's still a glaring need at left tackle. In my opinion, you need 2 starting caliber receivers, not 1, but 2. Maybe you can get one of those via free agency. Mike Williams is still out there. Hollywood Brown, you may not love him. He is a starting caliber NFL receiver. He does have a defining trait that defenses would have to account for. Would you love either of those moves? You might not. Would they be upgrades over what you have right now? They certainly would be. So, if, again, in 5 minutes, we find out that they're signing Tyron Smith, that they're signing both Mike Williams and Hollywood Brown, and they want to pair those two with Pop Douglas, and that's your starting trio of receivers. That's a representative NFL receiver room. Is it blowing anyone away? Probably not. But again, it's making the life of the young quarterback that we think is going to be here much easier than it appears it will be, given the personnel at the receiver position right now. So we won't punish them for something they haven't done yet, but they still haven't done much at those spots. And so what does this mean for that 3rd overall pick? I still believe there's a high likelihood that the Patriots take a quarterback there. They need to be convicted on that player, whoever it is who falls to them. But I think even if the situation's not great, you could see a new quarterback, a rookie quarterback taken 3rd overall, make his way to Foxborough. Is that a good idea? That's the question. If the receiver room looks similar to the way it does now, if the tackle spot looks similar to the way it does now, is it a good idea to get a quarterback at 3 overall? I would still say yes, if you believe in the player. Forget about whether or not the roster is ready. If you believe the player has a chance to be a franchise quarterback, whether that's Jaden Daniels or Drake May, don't pass up that opportunity to draft him. Do not do it. Those opportunities are way too few and far between. Those types of players are way too few and far between. So ready or not, you better take them. The question to me then is, do you play him or not? And that's where I have a hard time. My good friend Scott Zolak says, if you take a quarterback at 3 overall, I'm sorry, you're playing him. And I get that. I'm actually, as things stand right now, understanding that they may add some veterans to this group as it's currently constructed, I would lean in Zoe's direction. Take the guy at 3 and play him. The owner probably would like to see him play. The fans would certainly like to see him play. And if you feel like he has the mettle that made him worthy of being taken with the number 3 overall pick in the first place, even if the situation's not great, you think he should be able to power through, ideally, get to year 2, get to year 3, and become the player that the team believes he can be. A la Joe Burrow. A la Peyton Manning. The examples of quarterbacks surviving bad situations and coming out the other side as great players are few and far between. But it has happened. And again, if you want to take this player 3 overall, in my opinion, part of the evaluation should be how much adversity can this guy handle? What kind of punishment, physically, mentally, emotionally, can he handle in year 1? Because by the time we get to year 2 or 3, we believe in ourselves. I'm speaking as the Patriots brass now, collectively. We believe in ourselves enough to the point where we believe we will have a much better situation around that player in 2025, 2026, 2027. It just might not be there in 2024. But we know we can't pass on him, so we're going to take our chances. If that scares you, I get it. I really do. Because I think there's a good chance after missing on Ridley and given what's left in free agency, given your needs in the draft, I think there's a good chance you don't have a great receiver room next year. I think there's a good chance you have real questions at left tackle next year. That, to me, not ideal when you're going to have a young quarterback in. But I mentioned that name, Joe Burrow. He survived it. A bad year 1. One of the worst teams in football, and he got hurt. That's how bad his offensive line was. But they came back. They were in the top of the draft. They were at the top of the draft, again, the following year after taking Burrow 1 overall. They were able to add Jamar Chase to a second-round pick at receiver from the year previous, the Joe Burrow draft class, in T. Higgins. Now they're cooking with gas. They're off and running. Their franchise quarterback comes into his own, and as long as he's healthy, which he wasn't this year, but as long as he's healthy, they look like Super Bowl contenders. That's what you're hoping for. Can the Patriots pull off the Joe Burrow blueprint? I'm glad you asked, because we have the perfect guest for this edition of the Next Pats podcast to tell us whether or not that's the route they should take. It's Solomon Wilcots. Had a career as a Cincinnati Bengal. Knows that team, knows that franchise, knows that area very, very well. We all know him and love him for his career as a broadcaster. He was on Radio Row during Super Bowl week. This is one of the banked interviews that we were able to collect weeks ago. But we wait for the perfect opportunity to present itself for us to share that conversation with you all. This, to me, is it. Because they might be looking at a Joe Burrow type of rebuild. At least that might be what they have to hope for. Because the situation might not be great for the next young quarterback that comes to New England. What does Solomon Wilcots have to say? What does he think the Patriots should do at 3 overall? Here's our conversation with Solly. Have at it. Very excited now to have with us on the Next Pats podcast the great Solomon Wilcots. Solomon, thanks for being with us.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Have to ask you about what's going on in New England right now. I want to start with the former head coach.
Yeah.
You made the transition from being in the game to being in the media.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what do you see as being next for Bill Belichick now that it looks like he's not going to be a head coach in 2024?
You know, I think Coach Belichick is one of those guys because he's such a great thinker, right? I think he is the kind of coach that could say, this year I'm going to watch a lot of football. I'm going to go and I'm going to stay in the lab. No one loves pouring through film and cracking the code to whether it's a defense or whether it's an offense. Who are some of the teams or the coaches that I had the most problems with that I can now spend a little bit more time working on their systems? I think he's going to quickly identify where's the next layer, where the game is going, and try to get ahead of that curve. I think he understands that he'll get another shot. He may not know where it's going to come from, but to take a year to do that kind of deep dive, I think you can see him doing that. He's a student of the game. He's going to always be that. If he's not doing that, you better hire him as a consultant, right? Because he can help you crack the code of any offense that's out there. He's one of the best defensive coaches I've ever seen. And offensively, he understands what they're trying to do as well. So I just think he has that great brain. I think he's going to take that year and get better. And I think we're going to probably see a great second act. Where it's going to happen, I don't know. But if it happened for Andy Reid, I think it can happen for Coach Belichick.
The consulting thing is very interesting because Kyle Shanahan was actually asked recently, would you bring anybody in to prepare for the Super Bowl to help you as you get your team ready?
Belichick
he's got a great relationship with Bill.
Oh.
Do you think a phone call was made there?
It better be. I think. But listen, here's the problem with Coach Belichick's going to get a call from both Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan.
That's a good point. That's a good point. He's sort of a double agent, I guess, in
no
that scenario.
That's right.
Wanted to ask you, when it comes to Gerard Mayo and the challenges now that he faces as a first-time head coach and filling the shoes of arguably the greatest coach of all time.
Yeah.
What do you think is his biggest challenge right now?
I think the biggest challenge is just really in what direction do you take the organization? Coach Belichick was there for so long that he left a deep footprint culturally, right? And I do believe that you just don't get rid of all of those things that Coach Belichick developed and built within the organization. I think the smart thing to do is to build upon that foundation. It's solid. It's already poured. It's already laid. It's already proven to be successful. Why would you want to disrupt that, right, and tear that down to start all over again? I don't think Gerard Mayo will do that. I think he'll say, okay, this is what works best for me. I'm going to keep these things. Here's where we can make some tweaks. Here's where we can change some things. And just from what I've heard, look, he could just start by making it a better place to come in and work on a day-to-day, right? People should enjoy. It's a game. They should enjoy playing football. And that's no knock against Coach Belichick. As Tom Brady Sr. said, he was a military guy, right? And everybody knows if you've been in the military, we got a friend who's going to be coming on in a minute. The last thing they care about is the fun quotient of when you come to work.
No question about it. And we just talked to Lawrence Guy, Patriots defensive lineman, a little bit earlier this week. And he won a lot of football games under Bill Belichick.
Yeah,
but even he acknowledged it was time for a fresh face.
Yeah,
and I think even though you might try to blend the old with the new, as you're describing Gerard should try to do, having that fresh voice, I think, could make a world of difference.
It can make a world of difference. I think for the players, I think everyone in the organization, I think even Mr. Kraft was looking forward to maybe infusing just a different energy within the building, right? And being able to kind of break some things up and allow each department now to be under new leadership. And let Gerard Mayo you just coach football. And these other things, we're going to give you some wonderful assistance and wonderful support. And I think they're in the process of reshaping that whole organization, but also while keeping, I think, the critical components of the culture that Coach Belichick instilled in the franchise.
I have a couple of team-building questions quickly for you, Solomon, here.
Sure.
And one is about the position you used to play for the Cincinnati Bengals. The Patriots have dipped into some very versatile safeties over the course of the last couple of years. Guys like Kyle Duggar and Jabril Peppers. They drafted Marte Mapu in the third round. Big kid out of Sacramento State, should be able to do a lot of different things. Where is that position going, and is it necessary that you have in today's game a true free safety? They really haven't had one since Devin McCourty retired. He was the guy for a long, long time who patrolled the middle of the field for them. They don't really have it now. Do they need one?
Well, for one, you need one, but I would categorize Devin McCourty as a multifaceted, versatile player. We all know when he came out of Rutgers, what was he? A corner.
That's right.
And then he transitioned to a safety. But he still had the ability to cover. He had this ability, he had from the neck up, he had the football IQ to understand what offenses were doing, and that's why Coach Belichick trusted him. But like those other safeties you named, he was a hybrid of multiple positions. Kyle Duggar is multiple at hybrid positions. I remember sitting down with Coach Belichick, and you know how you couldn't ask him specific questions about his personnel? What you could do is you could draw analogies of decisions he had made in the past and ask him, well, why did you do that? And then that kind of led you to the answer of why he moved Devin McCourty from corner to safety. I had asked him when he was the defensive coordinator with the Giants, there was a player by the name of Everson Walls.
Sure.
Great player with the Cowboys. He was a cornerback his whole career. Later in his career when he was playing with the Giants, they moved him from corner to safety. Belichick was effusive with praise. Well, Solomon, here's what I saw in him. He was good at this. And now I'm taking my notes. All of these things I'm applying to Devin McCourty. He don't know he's telling me about Devin. But it's really the things that we just talked about. Multiple. He was bright. He could communicate and get people lined up to make sure that The entire defense was operating cohesively. And I think that's what you're looking for the Patriots. When you talk about replacing Devin McCourty, that's what you need. Someone from the neck up, but yet someone physically who is still multiple. They can play multiple positions as McCourty was able to do. But his football IQ was off the chart, and that's what's, I think, critically important.
Not necessarily thought of as a quote-unquote need for the Patriots,
yeah.
But I think it is a position that they're going to try to address this offseason. Last thing I wanted to ask you football-wise here. You're so tapped into everything going on in Cincinnati. Obviously, a few years ago, they made a draft pick, the top of the draft, that changed their franchise in Joe Burrow. They were not a great team at that point, and they still, even in Burrow's rookie season, were not a great team. He ends up getting hurt that year. I think they won 4 games. The Patriots are in a similar spot now where they're in total rebuild mode, and it's not a great roster, especially in the offensive side of the ball. Should they adopt the Bengals model and take the quarterback anyway, even if the rest of the roster may not be necessarily, quote-unquote, ready for him?
Think about it. When Tom Brady left this team, they had a team and they had a quarterback. Only one guy went walking out the door, right, for this team, for the franchise to hit a lull. The quarterback is that important, right? And look, when Mac Jones came in that rookie year, when he played well, he didn't play great, but he played well, they got back into the playoffs. But since the production at that position has declined, what you have at all these other positions don't matter, right? You're not going anywhere. No, when you have the opportunity to draft that high, right, and the quarterback is there, now he's got to be the guy. He's got to be what I call Seabiscuit. He's got to be that stud, that talent. And you know it when you see it. When we saw Joe Burrow, there was no question what they were going to do with that pick. Their phone was ringing off the hook with teams wanting to trade up to get that pick because they wanted that player. I suspect that the Patriots are going to get a lot of calls. Who they like at the quarterback position among this draft class, I think is going to be critical. And if they can get him with that third overall pick, they should take him. If he's gone when they go on the clock, then they should either trade down and get more picks or maybe take a really great left tackle if they're there on the board when they go on the clock.
Makes a ton of sense. Okay, Gerard Mayo, you watching this now? Solomon Wilcots says, if the quarterback's there, you got to get him, all right? This guy knows. All right, let's welcome in our friend Chris now. Chris, you're going to tell us about Macy. Thanks for being with us here. Sure. What is Macy? What could our listeners learn about Macy that you could tell them now?
So Macy is matrix autologous chondrocyte implantation. That's a mouthful. Basically, autologous is the important part, and that means your own tissue. And for somebody with cartilage defect, I had that really bad, both knees. I was in the military in my mid-20s, and I couldn't perform anymore. And kind of like Solomon said earlier, like fun is not a requirement in the military, but as a special operator, if you enjoy what you're doing, you're going to be better at it. And I wasn't enjoying it anymore because it hurt so much. I couldn't even do the job. So I got out, and I was thinking about just healing up and resting, and maybe it'll all come back. That doesn't happen with cartilage tissue. It doesn't come back on its own. And so after a couple of years, when I was still having this issue and it got worse, I couldn't go down the stairs without holding onto the railing, then I reached out, found an orthopedic surgeon. He tells me about Macy. So the autologous part, it's my own tissue. They take it out, they harvest it, they put it in the lab, and then they put it back in when it's ready. And now I've got cartilage again. It took about a year to recover, and I made a full recovery, and I can do everything I did before. So I was 29 when I had the procedure. I'm 36 now, and I could still do a pickup basketball game. I can go snowboarding, do box jumps, CrossFit. It doesn't matter. I'm here for it.
Is it one of those things that you might have to go back in at some point later and touch it up, so to speak, or is this something that is going to last you a while now?
That was a key part of that decision, was some of the other options out there, which I don't know if I'm at liberty to discuss. They require that maintenance. You got to go in every 10 years, 20 years and replace a piece or, get the oil changed or whatever, right? This is permanent. It's my own tissue. So as long as I take care of it, I'm good. And so far, I'm all right. Like I'm not wrapping it up like I should when I'm doing some of the squats, but like I feel great.
Well, that's awesome, and I'm sure our viewers, our listeners, a lot of them are in the boat that you were in at one point in time, and maybe Macy is something that they should be looking into. Chris, thank you so much. Solomon, thanks so much for your insight. Really appreciate it, guys. There you have it. Mr. Wilcots, he agrees with me. Go with the quarterback anyway. You can't pass on him. If you disagree with us, let us know in the comments. If you're watching us on YouTube, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, leave us a comment. Leave us a rating while you're at it. Maybe even subscribe and tell your friends to subscribe as well. We certainly would appreciate it, even if you disagree with my opinion that the Patriots should still go with a quarterback at 3. This transitions us to the next part of the podcast here, which could either be viewed as encouraging or depressing, depending on how you view some of the players in this year's draft class. Now, for some of you, your understanding of this year's draft class, and I get it, probably doesn't go all that far beyond the quarterback position. But for some of you, again, I know we've got some real draft freaks that listen to this podcast, and we appreciate you. We love you. This is what this podcast is here for, is to provide you the content that you need to breathe. So some of you will have significant takes on some of the names I'm about to mention to you, but I've been asked to do a 7-round Patriot-specific mock draft for NBCSportsBoston.com. It may or may not be on the internet as you're listening to this. If it's not yet, it will be soon. But keep an eye out for that. What I will do here today on the podcast is share with you my first 4 picks. And I'm making these picks under the assumption that there aren't many significant additions made in free agency between now and the draft. Ooh. Kind of hurts to even think about that, doesn't it? But that's the reality of the situation. It takes 2 to tango. The Patriots can't force a Mike Williams or a Hollywood Brown or a Tyron Smith to sign with them. So this is how I wanted to handle it. I fired up the Pro Football Focus mock draft simulator. I go through all 7 rounds Patriots picks with that fresh 6th rounder, courtesy of the Jacksonville Jaguars in that Mac Jones trade, by the way. Let me tell you how the first 4 rounds broke down, okay? Number 3 overall. No trade. You stick and you pick. And you take your UNC Tar Heel, Drake May. Prototypical size, prototypical arm, great on the board, high football IQ, only 21 years old, all kinds of ceiling. You're projecting that you're able to put him in a better situation than the one he was in the last 2 years in North Carolina. You're going to foster that talent that he clearly has. You're going to nurture him, and you're going to watch him grow in New England and turn into the face of your franchise. Congratulations. You got Drake May at number 3 overall. Then in the 2nd round, you're going tackle because you still have questions at left tackle. And you think this guy might be able to do it. A la Matt Light. 2nd round tackle, had an 11-year career, 3 Super Bowls, and a first team All-Pro in 2007. That's all. That's all we're asking for in terms of a 2nd round tackle for the New England Patriots. Is that too much to ask? But yes, of course it is. Of course it's too much to ask, but you can hope. And in this scenario, the Patriots hope that Jordan Morgan, tackle out of Arizona, can be their next Matt Light. A little bit undersized, just like Matt Light was. He's going to be in that 6'5", 6'6"-ish range. So he's not quite Nate Solder, but big enough, in my opinion. 320 pounds. And yes, he might need to get a little bit stronger, but he's a good enough athlete, in my opinion, to take on that blind side protector role. Needs to get stronger, needs to be able to handle physicality on the edge, needs to be able to stonewall a bull rush at the NFL level. And so it might take some time before you really see him blossom. Again, especially since he's pretty fresh off an injury. But it's rare to find athletes who are as big as Morgan is. And Morgan would be the kind of guy who would qualify as a first rounder in most years, quote unquote. This is the kind of draft you might see 9 tackles go in the first round, maybe 10. And so if there are that many talented players and Morgan slips, that could be to the Patriots' benefit. You get him at the very top of the 2nd round, 34 overall, and you cross your fingers and you hope he's your left tackle of the future. You hope you lucked out. You hope you lucked out that it just so happened when you desperately needed a tackle, this just so happened to be one of the deepest tackle classes in recent draft history. So Jordan Morgan with your 2nd round pick, he's protecting Drake May, your franchise quarterback. What do the Patriots do in the 3rd round, you're asking? Glad you asked. You're dipping back into North Carolina, baby. Has anyone ever been excited for 2 of their first 3 picks in the NFL draft to be North Carolina Tar Heels? Maybe. I don't know. We'd have to go back and look at that Julius Peppers draft from years and years and years ago. And I would never say that to a friend of the podcast, Bucky Brooks, proud North Carolina Tar Heel. But the Patriots, with their third round pick, top of the third round, mind you, number 68 overall, they take Devontae Walker. 6'2", 200 pounds, blazing speed. This is your vertical boundary threat. He immediately becomes your best player in that kind of role on this Patriots roster. Again, we're assuming there's no Mike Williams. We're assuming there's no Hollywood Brown. But you put Devontae Walker in there, who already has a rapport with Drake May. You give him Pop Douglas on the inside. Okay, now you've got the makings of a nice, young, developing receiver core. Is Devontae Walker the next Davante Adams? No, he's not. This is the third round, friends. You get what you get and you don't get upset, as we say at the Perry household. But given that chemistry, we've seen this happen before, right? Higher level players, don't get me wrong, but Jalen Waddle and Tua Tagovailoa, Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Can you carry over what you established in college and take it to the next level? Now, it's not as though Drake May and Devontae Walker were able to develop all that much in the way of chemistry in North Carolina, because Tez Walker is a transfer from Kent State. 2021 there, 2022 there, 2023 gets to North Carolina, is only able to play in 8 games, but 41 catches, just a tick under 700 yards, 17 yards per catch, 7 touchdowns. Not a bad year. And again, at this stage of the draft, it's hard to find true game-changing types. And while that's what the Patriots need, and while he is no sure bet to be that guy, Tez Walker might be your best option in that regard. Tested really, really well at the combine. 4.3, 640, that's the 91st percentile for receivers over the course of the last 2 decades or so. 40.5-inch vertical leap, that is the 93rd percentile, and a broad jump of over 11 feet, 134 inches. That's the 97th percentile. So you're talking about a really explosive athlete who at 6'2", and just a shade under 200 pounds, has that boundary receiver body type. At this stage of the draft, I think you might have to be satisfied with that and hope that whatever relationship those two guys have, May and Walker, carries over and gives you something early in their pro careers. Okay, 4th round pick. This will be it. You have to find the full 7-round mock over on NBCSportsBoston.com. They are double dipping, the Patriots are, at receiver. And they go with a smaller body this time. Somebody who should be playing off the line of scrimmage. Somebody who might challenge Pop Douglas for reps. And so maybe you don't love this pick in that regard. But in my opinion, you could play both of these players at the same time. Both Douglas and 4th round pick out of the University of Virginia, Malik Washington. Now, another Lilliputian at the receiver position. 5'8", but almost 200 pounds. Does he have to be a slot? Probably. Could you get him off the line and use him as more of a Z? I think you could at times. And I think he's explosive enough as an athlete that you might find some value in using him as a bit of a gadget player. When you look at some of the numbers there, even though the height isn't what you would love for it to be, he still ran his 4.47. His vertical is 42.5 inches. I mean, this is ridiculous. That's the 98th percentile for receivers. Broad jump of over 10 feet, 10.5 feet, 79th percentile. This is a thickly built, though undersized receiver who had ridiculous production at UVA. He had 100-plus yards in 10 of his final 11 games in college. And I think has the yards after catch ability to be able to just get it to him in space, throw him a screen, see what he can do with it. Again, is it redundant to Pop Douglas? It might be, but let's remember, Pop Douglas, as much as I like him, as much as you like him, had some issues staying on the field, and they weren't all related to his early season fumble. That's a tough place to play as an undersized player. Not only short, but also light. Washington at least gives you a little bit more sturdiness from a physical standpoint as somebody who's going to be playing, for the most part, as an interior player. But I think could end up being a really productive player at the next level, given his athleticism, given his production in the ACC. A lot of ACC love in this mock draft, because here are our first 4 picks. Drake May out of North Carolina, 3 overall. Then you have Jordan Morgan, the tackle out of Arizona. So you get a Pac-12 guy in there at 34 overall. Receiver, Tez Walker, again out of North Carolina in the 3rd round. And then in the 4th round, you're doubling up at receiver because you need to. You need to. It's Malik Washington out of UVA. Let me know what you think of those 4 picks. Check them out, watch them, see what they have to offer, see if you like those selections, see if you hate them. Let us know. We'll be back here next week with another edition of the Next Pats podcast, another fantastic conversation we have lined up for you. I think we're going to continue to double up in terms of 2 podcasts a week. That should be our schedule up through the draft. You know we're going to hammer you with draft content the closer and closer we get to that. But perhaps we have some free agent moves to react to next time we speak. Keep an eye out for the next Pats edition very, very soon. We'll talk to you then.